Stacy, good morning. Yes, you are still on mute.
My Zoom is all different because I uninstalled it and reinstalled it.
So it looks like your lipstick is mostly gone.
It is gone. That's why I uninstalled Zoom. That's what I was told to do to take care of it. But now it just seems really too close.
Too close. If you have a certain camera that uses a certain piece of software called a driver, that software sometimes can control zoom on your camera.
I don't know. This is good enough the way it is. Hello, kitty. I had a cat that looked like that called Tommy.
Oh, really? Do you remember what I named this one?
Tama something. It's a word that I don't.
Tatami.
Tatami.
Yeah. And Barry actually recognized the word.
Can I see your face, please?
Eventually.
I don't want to talk to the cat. I love the cat, but he doesn't need to see my face.
My face is much less photogenic. Okay, something like that.
Much better.
Okay. Early apology. I will be leaving today right at 2-hour mark. I have a lot going on today. So if it all goes well, maybe I'll tell everybody next week what's going on.
Oh, okay.
What's going on?
Okay.
But this one just went to the vet yesterday. Saw the vet for the very first time.
And everything's good?
Oh yeah, he's got some some shots, and actually can't really tell how old this cat is, but they estimate somewhere between 4 and 7 years.
Okay. So I want to clear. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No. I was just talking about a cat.
So I want to clear something up because I was in a conversation with somebody and I was talking about Doug Engelbart, and I said I don't know about him, only what my friend, what Sam tells me. But the one thing that I remember hearing was that he was all about recording all sessions. And, and I said, and I didn't know what his reasoning for it was, but I knew that it was the absolute right thing to do for my own set of reasons. But this person said that Doug Engelbart was not the one that said that. And I was insistent that if Sam said it, and this is like Sam's idol or mentor or whatever word you want to use, that it had to be true. So I just want to verify.
Yeah,
and have to put into context.
He didn't verbatim ever say that, but all that I know about him, about making sure that we have the raw record, making sure that nothing gets deleted, making sure that nothing gets changed, making sure that, basically we have a corpus of data that we can actually build upon. All of that is consistent with Doug. Now, he never actually engaged in a lot of Zoom meetings. He was before Zoom, he was before Skype. So I'm not attributing him to saying, oh, you got to record all your Zoom meetings. But everything I know about him says he would prefer to have the exact raw record and not to ever have it be deleted or changed. Hey, Jean-Paul. And so I'm curious who this person is who was trying to correct you about Doug.
Oh, I'll tell you later. Okay. And it wasn't that he was trying to correct, it was, Yeah,
it's just that he never verbatim said those things, but I do think that were he active today, he would say those things.
And sort of what I said is that you knew him and that's how he thought. So thank you for clearing that up.
Yes, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I look forward to understanding who else might be curious enough about Doug to engage on his word and his.
Well, I think the point was so that I wouldn't repeat information that wasn't accurate. I think it was to help me out and to correct me.
Okay. Jean-Paul, how goes?
Hello, Sam. It's been a long time. Hello, Stacy.
Hello.
Good to see you, both of you. Lovely.
Thank you.
Well, I was actually watching a video of you and Maxwell. So
right?
I saw that, with you and Kayla and Maxwell and
Oh, right. That
Dakota.
was.
I think it was
It's
Dakota.
going to. It's going to be another one tomorrow.
Yes, I understand.
That's fun. Really fun. Well, you know them personally. That's you are in a luxurious situation that you have been
yeah.
able to see each other physically.
They visited me for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I saw the photographs. It's beautiful. You live in a beautiful place. You have beautiful views and everything.
Well, that's why I discovered that when I got here, I discovered, I'd like to die here, actually. I would be very happy dying here. Maybe a few other places, but this definitely. Yeah, Maxwell, when you open him up, he can go a mile a minute. Boy, he can really, chatter and engage, and he's very personable.
Yeah, interesting. And this young lady, this Dakota, she's very calm. She's just about total opposite, and lovely to deal with these two personalities.
Yeah, I actually don't know Dakota. I only know Kayla and Maxwell.
Of course, yeah.
And her other son, by the way, Damien, who was not in your.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting to see how both deal with each other in this. That one is open to it and the other one refuses.
Well, Damien is older. He's 13, going on 14, so he's beginning to start those teen years.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think all teens have to go through that phase. Stuff happens in his brain. That's called teenaging. I was that way. I was actually one of the worst teenagers I could imagine myself.
Really?
I was not a good teenager. I was very bad to my mom. Yeah, and I'll tell a small story while we're waiting here. My dad came over to the United States to go to, Stanford, finish his PhD when I was about 2 years old. So I and my mom and my just born brother were still in Taiwan for about a little over 2 years, until he got close enough to his degree that he brought us over, and then we rejoined him. But by that time, I had forgotten everything about him. And so I was very rude to my dad when I first met him again. Yeah, I'm not proud of that.
But how old were you?
When I got to the US, I was 5, a little over 5.
Yeah. So okay. So how does that tie into teenage years?
Oh, I've always been a brat. Yes. Yeah, I'm still not emotionally mature. I still have to grow up. As you can tell, Stacy, from the times that I get pokey and piss people off.
You're ahead of the curve, Sam.
Anyway, Jean-Claude, what has been going on other than nice videos?
Well, it's a lot going on with our Tuesday Zoom sessions, a little bit like what you're doing here. A few months ago, Pema, I don't know if you know her. Stacy knows her because she's probably you've come across her. She told us that she was going to organize a peace festival in Nigeria, and this is going to be a jazz concert. And then I decided to make peace a topic for this year, to not just only have the expectation of a beautiful session, but to see if we can create community around the whole idea of peace, inner peace, outer peace, and everything. So we started setting this up, and on the 21st of January, we have our very first online event. And she's been asking people to do presentations and bring in art and music. So we will have a very diverse, very first session. But as I'm talking about it for different people start joining in and want to do something with the idea. So now we are shaping up already an event also in February, and that will be very specific about inner peace. And then we are working also on how can we organize government or businesses from to take away that competitive edge, which and get them into their authenticity and integrate it into society to be successful like that. So it's incredible how these things suddenly interweave into things. So, well, I'm very excited about that. That is from a worldwide scale, because last year, and I think Stacey might remember that, on the 20th of March, because of the equinox, we decided to do the Happiness Day. And that was a very similar type of attitude, that people started to engage with the word happiness, and we had children in 14 countries doing drawings, making music, and the classrooms doing things. And I remember that we had children from Turkey dancing with children online, dancing with children in America, which was like, wow, amazing. How do people pick up these kind of things, get enthusiastic, engage, and then share this with us across the world? So now I'm very hopeful that with peace, we will be able to do a similar thing, but not only just once and one day, but we can make it a program which builds up towards July, when this Nigerian conference is there. That's just the international part. The local part is very much my air quality type of community here is growing very, very deeply now into really, well, with 23 municipalities, and you have to imagine all those municipalities have their own political structure, and so managing to get all those communities, all those municipalities to work together on air quality on a regional basis, above regional basis, and also taking responsibility themselves is kind of unique and beautiful to see that people are very warm-hearted, even politicians, on the aspect of health and air quality. And even new laws are coming out and being seconded by people. So, but now we get in 2022 into the complexity of getting social change going. So I'm trying to get the people to have the guts to actually do things in a positive way, obviously, but to get people out of cars, for instance, and get them on the bicycles, or doing things in the neighborhoods which are a little bit more, more decisive than just measuring air quality, for instance. Well, that's the kind of things that are going on with me.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And what about personally? If you
personally, yeah. Well, I don't know if you know my personal situation. I have two daughters, and I'm single dad, but daughters have grown up already. One is 27. She's living in another city now. With a boyfriend and two kids of her boyfriend, not of herself. And the other one is 21, and she's with her boyfriend right now in Utrecht, in another city, and they're trying to be adventurous. We are living in a lockdown right now here in the Netherlands, so they have to try to cope with that and try to adventure somewhere. Well, and then I'm also caretaker of my mother. She's 86 years old, so I'm trying to trying to have a wellness-driven lifestyle based on my own ideology, but trying to take responsibility together on these kind of things. So yes, well, that's just about my thing, taking care of the food and and making sure that everybody has a well-balanced life, and everybody does their best to have an unbalanced life. So okay, it is like, well, fun. Anyway, but that's enough about me, I think, because I see Barry coming in and Kylie coming in. Well, this is absolutely beautiful. Even Alex, so yeah.
Well, just quickly, I think you and I have other common touch points we could potentially spend some time on, because I have two daughters, plus a son, by the way, but I also have two daughters, 27 and 18. So approximately, the same shape of family. I'm not sure if it's a son or not. Yeah.
And you'll be taking care of them also as a single dad, or?
Well, I am separated, soon to be divorced. It's weeks to the filing, but yes, my youngest was actually living here with me for the last 4.5 years. 4 years, yeah. So that was a very good experience. She and I got to know each other quite well.
All right. Seems to be some similarities here. Yeah, my youngest is still living with me too.
Cool. All right, so welcome Barry, Alex, Colin, Kayla, Stacy. We're still in gathering mode.
Sorry, I'm late. I was lost track of the time.
It's very unlike you, Barry.
I know. I overslept this morning also, which is also very unlike me.
I've done that.
I actually received the invitation through our Dutchman. What's his name?
Harry?
Tees,
Oh, Tees.
Tees. Tees.
Yeah.
Do you actually pronounce it Tees? How do you pronounce it? His name?
Let me see. Hang on. Thijs, yeah, Thijs van der Veer.
Oh, Tees.
Thijs.
Okay.
Thijs.
Right.
Yeah, he sent me the link. So I understand that your subject is how to create collaborations today or something.
Actually, I think you've been here before on Saturdays. I believe you even presented to us on Sustainocracy one time.
I did, yes, I did. That's about a good year ago, 1.5 years ago, I think.
Not forgotten.
It's been a long time, but then I haven't seen any invitations coming along. I don't know what your frequency is because I do enjoy participating, and indeed.
Well, just FYI, and also for the record, if you're a member of the Global Challenges Collaboration Facebook group, then if you look under, I think, announcements, it's usually there. There's a bunch of stuff. I normally do not post the announcement like Doug does on Sundays, but I do post the actual video after the session. And the video usually comes, hours to days, sometimes weeks after, but that will also be evidence that, these things are going. I don't think we've missed one for quite a long time.
Yeah, it's every Saturday.
Yeah, I don't think, holidays, Christmas, New Year's, doesn't matter. We still get together because we still like.
We like each other.
Yeah. And so the premise here is if we want to help the world and our future generations, what do we need to do? What kind of capabilities do we need to develop? And most of the time, that answer is always, oh, we could do this, and we could build that, and we could agree on that, whatever. So that's an external, interpersonal kind of interaction. But usually what happens when those go wrong is we don't actually look at what happens internally for us when we actually think we're collaborating, but we're bringing our own mistaken beliefs, our models, our demands, our assumptions, our emotional immaturity, our compensation needs, our needs for recognition, all of those issues come up. So we look at what happens when collaboration succeeds, but we also look at what happens when collaboration does not succeed. And the whole point is to understand how successful collaboration can scale. And if we can't actually understand it in the micro, then we have to look at whether or not we have even a chance at understanding it in the macro. So yes, ostensibly the question is, what can we do together? But with most groups, it's always, what can we do? What can we agree on? What do we need to build? How do you work on my project? There's a standard list of misconceptions that I call smart people problems, but there's another list that I also make fun of called dumb people problems. And it's responsible people who make smart people problems. But when you demonstrate your lack of understanding of the way the world works, those I call dumb people problems. So anyway, that's my own personal take. No one else here will probably give you that take, but this primarily is a town square for well-meaning people to come and talk to each other and possibly develop pairwise collaboration. I don't actually hold hope that we as a quote unquote group do anything that's chartered or unified among us, But I think it's chances for, one-on-ones to go off and take a life of their own. So I've talked enough. That is my view of GCC. Stacy and Barry and Alex and Colin and Kayla will have their views. So they're welcome to check in and also respond to that and or Jean-Paul and or anything else. I will shut up now.
In science, a major tool for thought is what we call model-based reasoning, building and exercising models that track the behavior of the world around us. And although that's my discipline and my career, I've discovered that model-based reasoning is not a very strongly developed academic topic for general education. And a lot of people, if you say model-based reasoning, they kind of not sure what you're talking about. And I think that one of the really serious problems in our culture is not enough people are adept at the tools for thought associated with model-based reasoning, which includes critical thinking, constructing models, exercising models, testing models, applying the protocols of the scientific method to choose models which are reliable and discard models which are unreliable. And our culture is full of people who can make predictions which are so far off the mark, it's ludicrous. And that reveals that we're just not very good at this important intellectual tool of model-based reasoning, which is why we can't solve a lot of problems.
And I think part of the reason for that, which is what my interest is that we don't have enough experience looking at models side by side and kind of weaving them. And so for me, it's not just about finding experts, but it's really about finding experts who play well with others, because we need to hear them speaking and combining and figure out for ourselves what fits into the model for ourselves.
Alex?
Is my microphone okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. I was just about an hour before this show, I was working on my Links Plus page, and I added a page there to Jean Paul's Sustainocracy. I think you'll find it at number 15, the one after Doug's All in One Mind. So these sites are gathering interest because, not personally between people, but they're gathering interest by the bots that surf the internet when they come across my Links Plus page. Find all those links. It seems to strengthen their database. It gives them an idea of what's out there, and so it's one thing I can do just to make sure I update that Links Plus page a couple of times a month with interesting sites that I've come across, because this collaboration of links is forming a synergy, a synchronized,
Synergy.
a synergy. Thank you, Barry. And it's a model in a way. It's come from design thinking, model-based rationality, because I'm sure that not only humans are looking at this stuff, there's machines looking at it too. And that's why I'm thinking along those lines of the Star Trek Enterprise systems that can go into deep freeze for thousands of years and come back to life later. The machines are looking after the life-saving gear. Sustainability.
So Alex, can I ask you something? Because sometimes I'm confused about the intent. So does that mean that the bots will pick it up and promote that content more? Is that the hope?
Bots search the internet for web pages. They want to add it to the Wikipedia and the Botpedia and the Google and Amazon. They're all doing it. They're all searching the internet with these spiders. They send out spiders to look at the content on web pages. They read the data in the metadata tags that are at the top of every web page. Those metadata tags contain keywords and things like that, especially designed for those bots. So that's all going into the big database somewhere. There's probably quite a few of them. Sam knows a lot more about it than I do, but see, I'm doing what I think is the right thing to do, to get these people like Paul, like Jean Paul, with these sustainocracy ideas and the horizontal governance ideas, community of. I've got them all up there on Links Plus, and I think if anybody had half an hour to spare during the week, they'd put up a Links Plus page themselves, because that adds to the momentum that brings about a growing light in the darkness, a spark of internet activity, if you like. That doesn't have, you don't have to have fantastic content to put up on a web page. I think all content should be valued. And, you know, Doug mentioned an idea that he's got a project going to establish a token, and a physical token that's got a Bluetooth or a USB port. And that can be connected to a blockchain that registers all your activity online. Everything you do can add value to that blockchain algorithm. What do you call the page where it's all collected and analysed, the database page, the ledger. It's a ledger, blockchain ledger. So the transactions all mount up. Every link you put up on the site, every page you read for more than 30 seconds registers an interest and adds value to your blockchain token. So it could be a Doug Breitbart token, or Alex Reid token, or Barry Court token. We can all have your own token. You can wear it around your neck. So you can have a virtual one if you don't want to contribute to the industrialization and pollution of manufacturing things. So unless you manufacture them out of hemp somehow, sustainable substances. And hemp farms is a good thing to promote. So dragging CO2 out of the air reduces the need for these sage shales that we have to put up in orbit. And Elon Musk was even talking about turning his Starlink satellites into shades, increasing the size of their solar panels. So that's something to think about. Sam?
I'm just curious, what is the takeaway you like I mean, there were so many ideas and it went on for quite a while, so I'm still trying to figure out what the takeaway for me is. Are you saying create pages, or are you saying create a Bitcoin, or are you saying something else?
I'm saying establish some value with your tools. We've all got a computer because we're on the internet. We wouldn't be on the internet if we didn't have these computers. And you use a computer like a word processor, create a page. Join the pages together, link the pages with your friends, and you've got a mesh network, right? You've got a mesh network functioning online, and you can add content to it, or you can add a coin to it, or you can back it up by adding a link to Doug's idea. And this of course is the synergy that I was talking about before. It's a growing thing that's human powered and also machine powered, because we're using the assistance of technology. Over.
I don't want to monopolize this, but wouldn't every comment, wouldn't any post any of us make do exactly what you're talking about?
There's a JavaScript that's useful in measuring how long somebody spends reading a document online. If you go and look at somebody's page and you're reading their messages, or you're reading your own messages in your messages folder, and you're not there for more than 30 seconds, it's not counted. You can have an arbitrary amount of time to measure whether or not somebody spent their time on a web page reading it, or whether it was a bot reading it, or a unique visitor. It's all possible. They're all possibilities. We can make it work.
Barry?
As most of you know, I've written quite a number of blog posts and very short articles. Most of my articles are a page or two. About 30 years ago, even before we had the World Wide Web, I wrote about a one-page article called The Calculus of Ideas. And when the web became available and I could post it, I posted it on the web. So it's been up on the web for about 25 years now. I would be surprised if anybody here has read my one-page article, The Calculus of Ideas, or if they've read it, they can remember what's in it. But the thing about ideas is ideas are a dime a dozen. We are flooded with ideas, but a lot of ideas, when they're introduced, people think of the positive outcome if the idea is used, and they don't reckon the downside, the negative. And one of the powers of model-based reasoning is you run an idea through a model to see what are the outcomes near term and long term. And in sustainability, we find out that if we look for the long-term consequences of ideas, eventually the downside consequences flood the outcome and overpower the upsides. And one of the really important things about model-based reasoning when evaluating an idea is looking for the long-term consequences of an idea to see if it's sustainable and if it doesn't end up causing more harm in the long term than good in the short term. And this is one of the big failures of our culture. When the senator from Wyoming, Alan Simpson, was in Congress, he was in Congress for like 30 years or something. And he said that although he helped pass a lot of legislation, he said he discovered one law the way a scientist would discover a law of nature. He said, I discovered the law of unintended consequences. He said, time after time, we would pass legislation predicting wonderful outcomes, and time after time, the long-term outcome, or even sometimes the short-term outcome, did not live up to the promises, and the legislation turned out to be a bad idea in the long term. And this is why I think model-based reasoning is so important. Reliable models that accurately predict both the upside and downside consequences and can determine whether the trade-offs are worth it in the long term.
So one of the mistakes I think we make is we think too short term. One of the things we need to learn to do is to adapt / improve models over time. So any form of governance or agreement that doesn't allow for that adaptation or that evolution is almost guaranteed to fail on any metric that it was originally created for. So this whole idea of adapting over time, really understanding the new environment, the new situation, new stimuli, new important metrics is a key component. And I think if you actually take that into any form of thinking, you'll generally, I think, end up converging on a set of principles. And I'm wondering whether or not that's something that's so core that it trumps this whole idea of rule-based thinking. It's not necessarily that rule-based thinking leads you to chaos. It's that rule-based thinking without understanding how those rules need to adapt over time is the problem. Over. Stace.
Yeah, I just want to simplify that and apply it to human behavior. So for example, some people, if you're in an interaction with somebody and somebody's annoying you, you might on the short term think, better not to say anything and keep the peace. But if you follow that out, your frustration might build. That person, not knowing that you have an issue to start with, is going to continue that behavior, and long time, the unintended consequences is going to be an explosion. If I could just connect some dots, because earlier this morning I was listening to an old interview that you did with Tammy from 2017, and you were talking about like what happens with technology in terms of the way it grows. And that you were saying that you realize now that we have to look at those human-centered functions. And that's what I'm most interested in, which is why I want to just draw that connection. And part of the problem with creating those models is that we don't really see ourselves well. And we have a tendency to not want to focus on what would be called like the lower vibrations, because they're not bad. They're not good. They're just lower vibrations. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And Kayla has her hand up.
I wanted to add to that as well, and to say even more simplistic is we really need to get over the idea of ourself and contribute more to the greater of society, to our community. You know, I liked what Sam said before about thinking 7 generations ahead. And to do that, you have to kind of be outside of yourself and think more of the community and futuristic. So I just wanted to add that to this conversation because I do agree with all of you in that sense. Over.
Alex, can I just say one sentence so that I don't lose it, because it directly follows what
Okay,
Kayla had to say?
I
Yeah,
think yes, you can.
thank you. Thank you. Because something that I heard Daniel Schmachtenberger say today, which I totally agree with, is only when I've tended to my own state can I truly, or can real virtue truly emerge. And I think that's really important, because unless people's basic needs are met and they're able to tend to their own state, can we hope that they're going to reach out and, you know, do good for their surroundings? Thank you, Alex.
I was just wanted to add something about the way we can cooperate to work on a project that we all think is linked to something somebody else is doing. It's a matter of reinforcing. Over. Getting other, sorry, I'm finished.
Thanks, Alex. So on that point, this to me is another fine line. There's a lot going on in the quote unquote light worker community about self-care, and that self-care is necessary before one actually can do much beyond one's self. And while to some extent that is true, you know, the old saying is you can't pour from an empty glass. I do think that there's a fine line here, because so much of it, and this is borderline privilege, is that if one actually takes an inward view and say, oh, I must fill my glass before I can go out into the world and start pouring, I don't think that's actually necessary. My glass could be 20% full and I can already start, you know, helping other people who are thirsty. So there's a fine line. If everybody else is at 96% and I'm at 98%, fine, nobody's really suffering. But if I'm at 20% and everybody else is at 2%, I would still want to start sharing my water. And hope some of you get that reference. So I think this is an unexplored topic in the last 4 years about this whole notion of self-care. Even the whole notion of self-care has only evolved from a privileged state. And I say this very carefully. That whole notion of even having a concept of self-care requires that one be at a level of sustenance, a level of stability that much of the world actually does not have. So I approach this topic carefully because I know it can be triggering. But I do think that it's important to recognize there's a balance here. Over.
I want to double back to a topic from about 5 minutes ago. But when I was doing network planning at Bell Labs, one of the things that we constantly reviewed was a shelf full of documents called Bell System Practices. Bell System Practices was a whole multiple binders full of guidelines for how to run different aspects of the telephone business. And the people who were employing these Bell System Practices would from time to time come back to us and say, we're following the rules in the Bell System Practices, but the outcome isn't what we're expecting. It's not working right. And often I would be asked to take a look at that. And when I looked at the Bell System Practices, which were suboptimal, I found that they were written in the language of rules. They had very simple rules, but the rules were dysfunctional. They weren't living up to the expectations. And time after time, I found that I had to replace the rules by mathematical functions that were more subtle, more sophisticated, and more carefully crafted to manage the system that they were designed to manage. So we live in a dysfunctional society, and mainly because the rules that we're using are dysfunctional. They're not the correct function. They're crude, simplistic functions that don't do the job. And because of my career experience, I found this is a regular feature of our culture, that people who are trying to come up with guidelines are using this kindergarten crude rule-based language, which is unmathematical. It's mathematically unsound, and the subtleties between rules and correctly constructed mathematical functions is beyond the scope of the average layperson to appreciate.
Slash politician.
Exactly.
Stacy, then me.
I'll pass.
I want to definitely amplify what Barry just said. I can't believe that 250 plus years after the country's founding, we still have such simplistic thinking as, oh, everybody needs to make a minimum wage of $7.25 per hour. That clearly is not tied to anything except what the reasonable people thought at the particular time that that 7.25 cents per hour was set. But that was many decades ago. If we were actually modeling anything, even approaching what Barry is talking about, if we look at the level of income required to actually live sustainably in your neighborhood, then neighborhoods are different. Food prices, land prices, etc. Transportation costs are different everywhere. But yet people are so simplistic that they say, oh, let's apply something called 725. Why not tie it to the location? Why not tie it to time, the cost of living increase? Because it's too complicated. People can understand 725, they can understand 15. 15 brings it a little bit closer to the present. But still, that 15 is gonna be obsolete in a few years. And oh, by the way, those are still almost poverty levels. So why do we wanna legalize and mandate poverty? And so all of this model-based thinking, systems thinking, critical thinking requires a level of modeling, which again, I'll bring in, requires a level of understanding what we're talking about, defining the terms, defining the metrics, and really relating them, and relating them well and precisely in a model-based way, systematically, exploring the extremes, whether something is 0, whether something is 1, whether something is big, where big means something in every different context. That's a form of symbolic reasoning called mathematics. And many people hate hearing that. But until we get an appreciation for this, that mathematics is the language of relationships, then we're still going to get people who think too simplistically, too simply. And I know there's many other words I could use there, but I think I should stop now. Okay.
I'm just thinking about people who have difficulty attributing things to the collective intelligence or the community or the whatever you like to call it, the politics of the country. And they can also be valued with a basic income if the stipulation is that this universal basic income is available for people who have a universal basic understanding of the responsibility, because nothing's free in life, nothing's free in the universe, really. I don't think that's debatable, but if you have a responsibility to be aware of your role in contributing to the community, then you're deserving of some kind of universal basic income, I believe. But if you're not, then there's a question mark. That's when the rules come in. We've got to use these rules to help us make accommodation for this human condition. Those who wish to contribute may be able to be valued greater than those who show a significant detachment from contributing. Over.
Thanks, Alex. Stace?
Yeah. So I think we have to step back and go deeper and ask the question, what are the mechanisms within our human behavior that is allowing these decision makers who don't have these capabilities to get to the place where they're in charge of making the decisions? Until we've not just figure it out, but learn how to shift that, what's going to change?
Kayla, then I.
So Heiner invited me to go to this seminar, and I'm so sorry, I forgot what it was called, and I'm not at my desk right now, so I can't look it up. But it was just basically inviting people in corporations and organizations to adapt a model that allows for change, and to break out of the old way. And one of the quotes in that really stuck to me because it said something to the effect that managers would rather do the same thing and make the same mistakes than change, because you're going into an absolutely alien element because a system has been around for such a long time. And I'd like to say that, definitely change comes from the person and individual being okay with just making these mistakes and putting it there. And I think social media has been doing such a good job of, recognizing that it's okay to have, to fail. It's okay to start something, but just start somewhere and make that change. And, I think we all could do that on an individual level and practice it. And I think, it would cause people to catch on. But anyways, I just thought of that when you were saying what you were saying, Sam. And I'm complete.
Thanks, Kayla. Let me respond first with an agreement with Alex, but also another one of my small little triggers, okay? This notion of UBI, Universal Basic Income, I think it's another way to take a good idea and make it too simple. The problem with UBI is there's still the I word, the income word. Why is it an income? There's a social dividend, I think, that comes out of a successful society. If 1% of our population can take care of 90% of our food needs, if 1% of our population can take care of, name any other domain, whether it's designing a certain product, whether it's building an infrastructure for something, maybe not 1%, maybe it's 3%, but just use different numbers. We can actually, as a society, have a very functioning society, as Buckminster Fuller pointed out decades ago, where this whole idea of work needs to evolve. And why should one need to work in order to deserve food or to deserve a sustainable life? That also sounds like privilege, by the way. There's a way in which that does come across as privilege. So I actually like the idea of sharing the social dividend, but I don't like calling it income. I think it's an aspect of citizenship that should just recognize the success of the society that we're in, the citizenship of that person. That's idea number one. The second thing I'd like to do is actually try and take a very, again, simple answer to Stacy's question, which is, why can't we understand this? And that is simply because of this work idea, 40-hour work weeks, which by the way, used to be much longer. If quote unquote politicians and or the elite keep us busy, we don't have time to think. We barely have time to rest and eat. So there's a whole social design that keeps us busy. It's called busyness, which means you got to be thinking about what you're being paid $7.25 an hour for. You can't go think your own thoughts. That's why even gathering in sessions like this is privilege. That's idea number two. And I'll leave it at that for now because, oh, let me introduce one other idea, which is a note that I actually came into this session prepared to put on the table to see if people found it might perhaps interesting. It was the idea of what do we, and I think we've been skirting around this question. What can we do to improve our collective capability? That's really one of Doug's original questions. Stacy brought up Doug Engelbart earlier today. And everything I do, by the way, is still rooted in trying to take his vision, expand it, embrace it, and extrapolate it. So what is it that's about our collective capability that still appears so limiting? Like, for example, we can't think about complex models and communicate them to most of the population. And if we can't do that, then the best available thinking is not going to make any difference in elections. It doesn't even make any difference in reporting and journalism, some of them, because journalists may not know how to interpret those models. So the basic idea of democracy, which is majority rules, guarantees to me that the best ideas never get sufficient airtime. That's what I find frustrating about democracy. It's better than dictatorships. So I think there's a reason for its stage in our history, but I think we got to grow beyond that stage. We have to learn that there is better than democracy, and we have to evolve there. Otherwise, you know, this whole rule by the masses, and by the way, the masses are disappointingly unsophisticated and non-thinking, as represented by our politicians. That we're gonna die if we don't let our best ideas take effect. And that is a big source of my frustration. Over.
2 weeks ago on Christmas morning, I watched the launch of the Webb Space Telescope. And once it was completely launched and into free flight, I did something that I hadn't done in a year. I got to my feet and I applauded in a sustained applause and cheer, something I have not done in over a year. And here I was sitting in this very by myself. And after they got that thing up there, I said to myself, why aren't these people running the world? Why aren't these technologists running the world? And you take a look at the technology and the engineering and the science and the mathematics that went into the design and the launch and the operation of the Webb Space Telescope. It's going out to a point 1 million miles from the Earth called the L2 Lagrange point. And the calculus of that analysis, and when I say the calculus, I really mean Newton's calculus. How many people before the launch of the Webb telescope even heard of such a thing as a Lagrange point, or could understand the mathematics without it sounding like woo, like there's some magical place out there in space where this thing is going to reside? And you look at this design, the amount of mathematics, the sophisticated mathematical models, exquisitely sophisticated mathematical models, and that thing went on the trajectory with zero observable deviation from the desired trajectory. That's the kind of mathematical depth that we need to do complex things. And can you imagine that team ever trying to find their way into government to design the architecture of our legal system? There's no way that that kind of talent will ever find its way into politics. That's why they're doing things like working on space telescopes. That's the only place where that kind of intellectual strength can find a market.
That's the issue with democracy. We need better people in democracy. And there's an L2 Lagrange point. There's an L1 Lagrange point. The L2 point is behind us, in between us and the in the shade of the Earth. The orbit that's in the shade of the Earth's always pointing. It's always in an eclipse by the Earth because it's behind the sun. And the other one is in front of the sun, between the Earth and the sun. So that's the one in front of us. It's always in the sunshine. I think that's the L1 point. That's the point where we need the sail shades that can be dimmed. They've got a dimmer on them. You send a radio signal and they'll dim a bit more if you need it. Over.
A shade the size of a tennis court can shade an object that's about 10 meters across. The Earth is much, much bigger than 10 meters across. If a tennis court size shade, like an umbrella, sunshade, can shade an object that's the size of a human, how big do you need a shade to shade an object the size of the Earth? Do the math.
We don't need to shade the whole Earth. We only need to shade small portions of the poles, north and south poles. And the little satellites like the Starlink satellites, thousands of them, they can unfold a shade that's the size of 6 football fields.
Have
Each one of them.
Have you done the math?
I've done the maths in my head.
Have you done the math?
I ain't got a big enough blackboard, Barry.
You haven't done the math.
I've done the thought experiment. If we don't shade the Earth, we're going to fry. Over.
If you have an umbrella over your head and the rain is coming in sideways, does it block the rain? The sun comes in sideways to the poles where the Arctic ice caps are. If you put a sunshade up there, it can't be up there. It's going to have to be around the Arctic Circle because the sun's coming in sideways. That means it's got to be gigantic.
Actually, Alex was talking about putting it at L1, Barry.
Yeah.
The whole atmosphere gets warmed by sun rays. That's true. But the thing is, the failure to shade the Arctic is resulting in a loss of ice, which is increasing sea levels and also causing a problem with the oceans. The oceans are heating up too rapidly, and that's causing a huge issue. So, the L1 point will block, those shades will block the whole planet sort of thing. But if we put them in orbit just around the poles, it'll only block the pole, but that'll help reduce the amount of cooling at the poles.
You haven't done the math, Alex. I'm sorry, you haven't done the math.
Right.
If we got a shade out of the L1 point between us and the sun, orbiting the sun in the same, so the Earth's always in its shade, then it's going to reduce every one of them.
How big would it have?
Can we not do some ping ponging unless we decide that we really want to do that?
Let me finish with this statement. The first one that goes up is going to begin shading the planet. Over.
Space.
Yeah, I want to go back to in the chat, I were responding to me and you said something like, that's easy busyness. And I'm not sure, I want to ask you, which question were you responding to? But I also want to say that the default to think that it's easy and there's one answer is something that we need to guard against.
That's why I prefaced my remark.
Oh, so what was that in response to?
I think someone was asking a question, why aren't engineers in charge of something, government, etc.?
Running the planet. Yeah.
Yes. And I've brought up often that we don't have to run our country the way other countries do, and other countries don't have to run their countries the way we do. And I often bring up the example that in China, they take the smartest people out of all the national exams through every age level, and the smartest people are picked for government. And the smartest people who go into engineering eventually end up in government. So they have the lowest percentage, I believe, this is a few years ago, of lawyers in their government versus us. We probably have close to 100% lawyers in government. I can't even name a single person who's an engineer or a doctor or anyone else who had a lot of sophisticated education. I'm not saying lawyering is not sophisticated, but it's in a very different way, okay? Sophisticated technical information where truth was actually on the balance in government. We don't operate that way because those people, they don't look good on TV. They're not tall, they're not good looking. They don't have hundreds of dollars to spend on ads. The politicians do because they will sell themselves. And it's widely known that that's what happens in this country. Hell, we don't even want to call it bribery. We call it lobbying, but it's really just bribery. We've legalized it. So we have a whole system that keeps us from thinking because we say, oh, well, you got to work this many hours. Otherwise, you can't live because you're not going to afford your apartment or your food or your clothes or your warmth. So we have a built-in system where we barely have, by we, I mean most people, time and energy and resources to take care of our basic sustenance. And that poverty level is rising. The percentage of people below the poverty level, the percentage of children below the poverty level has risen over the last few decades. And among them, then of course, the single parent mothers. So that's my answer to your question. And I will let you finish your turn before I take my turn.
Yeah, so I just want to say that it goes beyond intelligence. Although I agree, or I think that in our government, the intelligence level has probably gone down. Up until recently, I think we have had intelligent people. I think that the bigger problem is how people want to yield power. And I think that we've had the people that wind up in government are people that want to wield power. And that's the issue. And again, that starts with me as an individual and how I behave with the people around me. And it grows that way. And I think we need to take a look at the starting point. And to go back to the other thing, I wasn't talking so much about self-care when I meant, to a certain point. Yes, my stomach has to be full and I have to have been well rested. Beyond that, what I was talking about was being able to clearly look at yourself and not only be able to clearly see your intentions, but be willing to admit it, because most people do not behave the same way they would if they knew they were being watched. So I'm talking about what contributes to those things.
Yeah, starting with accountability to self, but then that self is always filtered. That's why, in my view, there's got to be accountability to at least 2 of your trusted peers as well.
Not just trusted, but trusted and skilled.
And loving.
And loving. Well, I don't know if you could really trust them to that degree on that scale of trust if they weren't loving.
That's why I think the COI, by the way I define it, is so rare. You got to find people who are willing to call you on your bullshit. And we all have bullshit that we talk to ourselves about. Inner talk.
Can I add a really important point? Because this is where power actually ties in. If your livelihood, or it doesn't have to be in terms of money, but if there's something that is going to cause you being truthful to lose some sort of power, whether it's socially or financially, that's going to be a hindrance. And we need to look at that. And we don't spend enough time doing that.
Yeah, I want to shove that under the carpet fast. Okay. See, I want to make another point about this whole set of proposals. Every piece of imagination can be used to stimulate good thinking and good ideas. But if you don't elaborate these wild thoughts, these, flashes of brilliance, and take it to a reasonable level of precision, then it's poetry. It's not science. It's not model-based thinking. It's not critical thinking. It's just imagination. So there's a role for imagination, but learning and building in a discipline of taking ideas and looking at those implications and how they connect with other ideas and what that overall system of ideas, a model, might actually tell you is beyond just saying, oh, let's put up, a big umbrella at about 100 miles and make it so wide, right? Yeah, it's great, right? Great imagination. It solved the problem. Somebody else can go do it, right? I'll go play with my dogs. Yeah, we got to, take these ideas and learn from each other. I can actually say, hey, Barry, teach me about Lagrange. I could say, Jean-Paul, teach me about food. Stacy, teach me about emotions. Kayla, teach me about art. So all of these systems need to interact with each other. And that's why one of the things that I put in my presentation about the COI, by the way, is we have too many well-meaning people who are not collaborating, right? So we got a whole flock of really smart people over here who see a whole mess of problems over here, okay? And one person will say, okay, I'm gonna start a little micro investment project and send water to people over here in that village, which is wonderful, right? But then somebody else is over here doing something else over there. And sometimes this whole interconnect in the middle, society, makes it very, very difficult. We have a system that doesn't make doing good easy and effective and cheap, because so many efforts are working at cross purposes. And so that's called loss of efficiency. And we don't have a means for thinking about those systemic interactions. Because the minute you bring that up and you start looking at it and you start modeling it, you start actually making predictions, you lose people. People aren't patient enough to understand that. And by the way, they're not even going to invest in that kind of thinking. So how do you do that? When if you don't understand something on the ballot, you're not going to vote for it. That's why simple ideas are what get on the ballot. And not all good ideas are simple enough that everybody can understand them in 15 seconds, which I would gather is about as much time as the average person gives to a ballot vote. Oh, it's going to raise my taxes? I'm going to vote against it. That's about the amount of time a lot of these election ballot options get, regardless of whether it's for schools or for trenches or whatever. My taxes going up, I'm going to vote against it. It's that simple. How many seconds did that take? That level of thinking is too simple for us to build a well-functioning, evolved society. We are fucked if we don't evolve beyond that. Sorry to use that language. Over.
The government in Australia started doing community cabinet meetings. They would travel around the country to various towns to hold a cabinet meeting of the ministers. And that sort of attracted people to come and put in their, 2 cents worth at these meetings. And it's like the people who are coming to those meetings and speaking up were people who had a vested interest in a business or something in the community, a venture. But most of the people, majority of people who just work for a wage, didn't show much interest in government and policy. So I think the small local groups is the ingredient that's missing. The way we sustain this horizontal effort to get better governance and more and increased strength in democracy is by allowing these people to have their vote counted on a ledger that increases in value the more times other people tick it, you know, and that weeds out the corrupt people, that weeds out the money. If you get a big crowd of poor people ticking on something, say, yes, I'm not voting for higher taxes, but I'm voting for less corruption. I'm voting, by ticking this box, I'm voting for less influence by the lobbyists in Washington. That would work. That would be a better system. But there are other things that we can do. I'm sure there are. We've put our heads together. There are improvements we can make along the way. But the people with the vested interests are the ones that will say, I'm voting against that. Not in my interest. Greedy people who haven't got this ability to think with their heart for the better of the community good, the greater good. Who wants to vote for that? We should make that a priority, because we can do it by rewarding people. If they use a token, like this suggestion by Doug for his project, a token would be counted. And when they vote on something like that, or on an issue we all agree on in the community round tables, they earn a greater reward. The value of their token increases faster. Over.
I want you to indulge me in a back of the envelope, back of the head bit of mathematics that anybody can do without a blackboard. Once or twice a year, we have a solar eclipse where the disk of the moon gets between us and the disk of the sun. And if you've ever been in a solar eclipse, you know that the shadow where the moon is blocking out the sunlight is only about 100 miles wide. There's a spot on the earth, just 100-mile diameter spot that's in the dark, and the rest of the surface of the earth is not in the eclipse. Now, the moon is about 250,000 miles from the earth. The launch point is about 1 million miles. So take the disk of the moon and move it out to L1. Same disk blocking the sun. Now, instead of a spot that's 100 miles wide, it's going to be about 20 miles wide. You know, every day, half of the earth is in the dark half of the time. So imagine a disk as big as the disk of the moon out in L1. All you're going to do is shade a spot on the earth that's about 20 miles wide. BFD. I didn't need a blackboard to do that.
Not only that, the satellite Lagrange is not static with relation to the Earth.
Right.
It's still dynamic. It's still oscillating across the plane. So
Right.
you're not going to be able to, pinpoint that shadow on any spot on the Earth. We don't have that level of control yet. That you can do, without an envelope. And I'll take the next turn here, which is, it is not surprising that if you build a model of a human the way democracy does and the way our economy does, and say, imagine someone who's only voting for their own self-interest. That's actually built into the model. Nash did it. Democracy does it. Why are we surprised then that this whole selfishness gets all of these corrupt behaviors? And we call them unintended consequences. No, they were intended. Selfishness was intentionally put in as a basis of these systems, both democracy and the economy. Vote for your self-interest. That's what we're told in democracy. Okay? It's that simplicity that is something we need to evolve beyond. Because we all know as humans, most of us do care about others. But in our model of government, we're supposed to vote only for our own self-interest. So if you do that, the majority is always going to overrule the minority, and the minority will occasionally, not occasionally, but over time, get less and less empowered. And imagine then that the majority is getting less and less quality education because we've not been investing in education. We don't have appreciation for science. We don't have appreciation for truth. We don't even have an understanding of critical thinking. We don't understand what it means to collaborate. And we haven't even identified what the social good is because we've removed social studies from the curriculum. We've removed history, or actually, critical history. I can't even say this with a straight face. Critical race theory. I'd never heard of this before this past year or so. It's bullshit. This is called history. So if we remove all of these topics from education, it's no wonder we get a dumbed down education, we get a dumbed down population, we get a dumbed down citizenry, and they're all voting. I'm talking about the US, but this is probably not applicable to other countries, so you're probably in a better off situation. But in the US, this is what's happening. And yet, we still have a bunch of people that say, oh, I got my truth. That's your truth. It's equally valid. I can't stand that. If you want to talk about that, use the word experience. I've got my experience. You've got your experience. Don't call it truth. I'm a little bit animated by that. Over. Sorry, Kayla's laughing at me, so I'll shut up now.
In my experience, there's a tendency for people to come forward because they've got a vested interest. Now, if we can tweak the rules so that these community groups are focusing on avoiding that conflict of interest by people who are people with deep pockets who want to make their pockets even deeper. They're not doing it for the benefit or the greater good, they're doing it for personal gain. Somehow they've got to be valued less so that the people in the community who are genuinely thinking with their hearts about the greater good are increased in value, and they're put in better seats. They get seats closer to the chairman's seat, the chairman of the meeting who's controlling who can talk next and who's said too much and who's full of shit. And history has got to be put into the education system. Social studies, architecture, that's all part of history. I think art and science are both the most critical subjects for children to help them develop. And that's part of the community effort that I'd like to share with my local community. That's where the value from my input would be of most benefit. I think when people who know me there can judge me from their own experience to see whether or not I've got a vested interest or whether I've got in mind the greater good of the community, the greater good of the planet, the sustainability of the human existence going forward, because the population is still growing and we've got to do something immediately. The population could grow larger and still be fed, but not with this global warming, because it's going to destroy the seafood industry first, and it's going to cause a lot of chaos. So time for us to put our thinking caps on and get together in a serious conversation about uniting, I think, with the community of impact. We've got to keep Sam up to date and on board and update our bookmarks and links. That's what I'm trying to do. Bookmarks are the secret to an author's secret tool. Because when you're thinking about a subject to write, when you're writing and you're stuck on something, you can look in your bookmarks and find where you've been talking about it with somebody else. You can find a discussion over it because the bookmarks are in folders and the folders are categorized like a dictionary. Over.
So I actually think there's another problem that we're not talking about, and that is that we don't have enough people who are in authority who are willing to take a step back and to rethink what we're already doing. What I mean by that is to look at policy in terms of how is this policy fitting into a sustainable model. So for example, why aren't taxes for a Walgreens, for example, in my community? Why isn't it tied to how much profits they put back into the community. Why aren't we looking at it that way instead of looking at some arbitrary across the board way that people have learned to manipulate? Why aren't we looking to rectify the way we have things up, the way we have things set up with the way we know a system works in order to sustain itself? So that's what I have to say. And it starts with asking a question and having the power to have that question even reflected upon, because so often some of those questions, sometimes they come from children who can see things from a clearer viewpoint, and they're just, poo-pooed, like you don't get it, instead of saying, well, let's take a look at this. Let's do the math. Can we get from step 1 to step 2? If we can, then maybe we try to see if we can get to step 3. If we can't, go back to step 1, see if we can get to a different step 2. And keep doing that instead of either not looking at all or deciding that it's totally wrong. But again, it starts with a question, and I don't see that happening. And that, again, everything else I heard here, I agree with. I'm not disagreeing with anything. I'm just saying there's even more. And I'm just off camera because I have to eat.
Just think about, it took 20 years and $10 billion for a team of very talented people to put the Webb telescope into orbit. And it's about the size of a vehicle. It's about the size of a bus. What would it take to put that kind of talent to work to rebuild the architecture of human civilization itself? I mean, here, 20 years and $10 billion to put that simple device into orbit. Translate that to what it would take to reinvent Western civilization, to make it high functioning. They started at ground zero and they went through how many cycles of redesign and analysis to finally get one system that worked, one high functioning system. 20 years, $10 billion. 20.
And I just want to add, though, because it is so complicated, they didn't have to worry about some rich person with influence coming in and say, no, you should do it this way instead.
Or some voters in Arizona saying, no, you have to follow this set of rules, not that set of functions.
Right, but that's an important point.
Exactly.
They have a special alert system. The governing people, the planning people who put these things together, and they monitor it continuously. It's like, the beginning of something like the Eiffel Tower or the Taj Mahal started with one block of stone or one piece of steel. And it's the same with any project. It's been designed, the finished product's been designed, but it's open to changes along the way if things crop up. There was a situation when they knocked the telescope, it got bumped, and they had to recalibrate everything because of that knock in case it caused a vibration somewhere in the system. So these are issues that are catered for by the people who are in the planning committee. They're sophisticated. They've got sophisticated tools to keep an eye on all the departments that are working on the separate areas of the project to make sure they're all in touch with each other. They're all staying in the loop and they can follow what's going on. We can do that. We can keep our local groups growing by informing each other in the global group about our progress and what's going on. We can have Zoom sessions. Well, we have them, but we can do that too with the local group. Once we've got a few people in our local group, we can have face-to-face sessions, coffee nights and dinners, or Zoom sessions, virtual reality. Glasses are coming out. Google Glass is incredible. If you go out with Google Glass on, attached to your internet, with Bluetooth, you can look around the room and see people's names appear above their heads on the screen, on the virtual screen that's in front of your glasses. It's something like that. And you look at a sign, it'll read it in several different languages for you if you've got that setting. And also it'll show up, everything will show up that's in the on Google Earth and all the things that are there in the AI. Magic can happen like that, but it can distract your attention to other things that are important as well. So you've got to be aware of that. Well, I do. Maybe you don't want to be. It's your choice. We all have this freedom, which is an important part of this synergy. Freedom to decide what team you're going to back. So, you know, in that race, when you're talking about the democracy and politics before, not knowing who to vote for, you can you can back your favourite, and you can also back a few outsiders to have a bet in both races, sort of thing. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Over.
Thanks for humoring me. I'm settled down from my last rant. I'm about to rant myself up again, though. When we don't travel much, when we just stay in our own neighborhoods, when we don't understand the other people in the world, we get this provincial outlook. It literally means you only think about your province. And even when we go through school, we're encouraged to quote unquote compete. So there's teams, there's fraternities, there's other clubs, and this competition develops this sense of other. So we're kind of taught at an early age, otherism. Racism is just one form of otherism. So when something different is not you, it's easy for those in power to instill fear because, oh, those people are not like you. They want different things than you. They're going to threaten you. And that's carefully cultivated fear. Why? Because then they can solve that problem with defense. We will take care of your fear. We will defend you. We will build a military. We will build a wall. We will build an immigration service. We will defend you. And oh, by the way, we'll ensure that they hate us, they hate you, because we're going to bomb them. We're going to bomb them. And then we're going to say, oh, they hate us, therefore we have to protect us from them. That's how it works. It's worked beautifully. So we have to work hard for an economy where a huge proportion of it goes into our military industrial complex, the big money system, which is, you know, shipping war weapons back and forth, you know, and it's addressing our fear by giving us drugs to address that fear, because you can't handle it on your own. We have to give you drugs for that. You have to alter your mood. This is all pretty evident. It's all pretty visible. But these are not ideas that come across in 15 seconds on a ballot. Sorry, I got the ranting again. Anyway, so I'm basically saying that because we're taught to compete, because we're taught to be selfish, we're almost from the beginning taught that this community notion, this Ubuntu notion, is not the way we're taught. And oh, by the way, other countries are different.
Sam,
Computer, cancel. Sorry.
You don't have to yell at her.
I have to be quick because otherwise, I don't know. Okay, so what was I saying? We're not taught compassion for others as our basic tenet. We're taught selfishness. We're taught to compete. We're taught otherism, which shows up in misogyny, immigration laws, racism, disdain for the poor. So sad. And yet, there are countries where if you talk about self the way we do, you'd be slapped before you even finish your sentence. That's not good either. But still, what I'm talking about is that's not the cultivated value. So yes, there are implications, but we got to get beyond this. We got to get beyond the selfishness. We got to get beyond this provincialism. We got to get beyond this otherism. We have to, learn that the world is a pretty rich place. And most people just want to live a simple, happy life. They don't want to bomb us. We shouldn't want to bomb them. We shouldn't let our military do it. We shouldn't let our government sell safety to us. They can only sell safety to us if we're in fear. Over.
You mentioned cultivating, and it's a simple concept, cultivating plants, you give them the right nutrients and sunlight, but cultivating people to emerge so that they can resist this fear and be inquisitive and be eager to build something new requires a different kind of nutrient, wisdom and integrity, I think, for the trust, because there's a lot of trust required in all communities. Perhaps there's only one area of life where trust isn't required, and that's when you're deeply in love with somebody who's close to you. And you can afford to have that leeway, but otherwise there isn't any trust until the trust is established. And how do you establish trust? You need integrity. You need to have a few other things. There's quite a few ingredients. I've been studying it a little bit. So this is a way to cultivate a community that is willing to create change is possible. It's not that complex. It's a simple thing, I think, but it requires a degree of, what would I call, momentum. Momentum is only going to come from our individual heart, our individual desire to see change occur in the world. We can arrange you can make sure you strengthen the connection with the people who you think have good ideas, the people who understand the rule system and the models and the problems, the issues, and the way we focus on the issues. You can have 0-point laser focus, or you can have this diffuse focus that's taking in a whole lot of stuff, and one's more effective than the other. But they need to be combined in some cases. You need to switch from one to the other in other cases. These are tools and techniques of wisdom and thinking. But I don't claim to be wise or intelligent. I'm just recovering from a misspent life of alcoholism. So I've got a lot of work to do on myself, let alone save the planet. So I like to link up with these people who are focusing on small groups, because these small groups are little seeds, and we've got this pollination effect happening. It's an interesting pollination effect. One person links two people into a triad, and that triad creates an agreement when actually you and the other two people do the same thing. It creates a organic, sustainable, viral, exponential growth. Over.
Yes, I'd like to hear John Paul talk. I see you put something in the chat, but I'd rather hear it in your own voice since we're lucky enough to have you here.
Yeah, I put something in it. I've been listening to you all, and it's very nice, very entertaining. The whole idea that I get is that we are kind of judgmental to the way certain people tend to play the game. And play the game is by sending satellites into sky, and how politics plays their games and those kind of things that we tend to disagree with it. That's fine, you know, you can disagree with it, and I disagree with it. I don't play that game, and I defined my own game, and I started people inviting to my game, and I said, okay, well, if you don't like to play that game, let's play our game, and let's see if we talk about compassion, and that game is not compassionate, and our game is compassionate, then we can hug and we can share and we can create abundance and do these things, and we can apply the models that are probably more applicable to the type of game that we are defining rather than the game that they are playing. So I'm not going to be judgmental to their play. Yeah, it's wrong, it's destructive, and we are fucked, as Sam says, because everything is going to be destroyed and everything. But that is only going to happen if we don't define another game, if we don't define something else in parallel, which is going to be different. And so I'm doing that. And if somebody has a better game, then I'm very much inclined to play that game with the other person. But meanwhile, I do have my own thing. And it helps because a lot of people who are even in the other system and playing that game because they have to play that, because they happen to be politicians or happen to be in a commercial play or whatever, once they hear about the play that I'm proposing, then they say, oh, well, I want to play that game, you know, I want to join. Because they have a choice, and they didn't come up with that game because they were so occupied with playing the other guy. So yeah, and so all I would like to suggest in this, also in this community, rather than being so, well, we can eternally talk about all the satellites going and the 20 billion which has been spent on these kind of things and not on poverty. We can spend so much time on that, but let's spend some time on what play do we want to play, and let's just invite everybody to that play and see what kind of contributions can Barry give to with the modeling and the mathematics and everything to the game, that the compassionate game that we want to play. Alex is talking about the way the internet is structured and how we can actually make use of that internet that is being structured in such a way that people, when they look at a page a little bit longer, than they can get coins or whatever, you know, let's make that a system which is working in our benefit. If I look at Sam, he seems to be very worried about these kind of things, neighborhood work. Let's work about our neighborhoods and make the sum of the neighborhoods the world. And that kind of things, you know, that is the type of, so I put in a little video, which is a speech that I did a couple of years ago in something which is called Brain Candies, where I tell the people that I drew my line because it was talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Sustainable Development Goals like inequality and poverty and combating those kind of things from a United Nations point of view. And I said, all right, United Nations, that's just that, hierarchies of structures, economic hierarchies, political hierarchies, that inherently already has inequality in it. So if you want to combat inequality, then you don't have to talk about your United Nations, you have to define something else. So that is what I did. I defined something else. I crossed for myself a line. And when I cross that line, I can start comparing. I can say, okay, the way we do it is different. And if you want to do it different, then this is the way we do it, and you want to enhance that way of doing it in a particular way, then feel free to make that suggestion. All right. So that is the type of thing that I would like to introduce here in this community too. If we want things to be different, let's be the difference ourselves.
Viva la difference, the spice of life, and that the flexibility with the rules-based system can help us with that agenda. Not too flexible. I mean, you know, stretch a rubber band, it'll snap eventually. But you know, when a breeze is blowing, when the wind comes, the tree branch will sway in the wind. But if it dries out and becomes brittle, it'll snap off. So this rubberized idea is a great idea for the protocol, communication protocols, scientific discussion protocols, and local community roundtable protocols. that bring people in. How do you draw people in without the vested interest? They just want to make more money and get less taxes. It's why you can do it. I'm sure you can. There's already people here planning stuff like that, like people like Jean Paul, you know. Even Barry on occasion has mentioned things like that.
Yeah.
Those scientific teams, scientific projects like the telescope, project that took so long and cost so much, rewarded those people handsomely for the efforts they put in. But I guess, like any organisation, a lot of people were lower paid than others because the skills and the skill set they have to offer. So we can accommodate for that. The computer can accommodate for that sort of thing, not with professional certificates, but just with voting of the local group, voting for people they trust, voting for people they think are conscientious and diligent and have some integrity. Those are the things, key ingredients, I think. And that's why I've got a Facebook page called The Values, Core Values. I'll find the link and whack it in the chat for you. Over.
It's interesting you talk about rules and those kind of things. Well, one of the funny things that I get very often is that everything I do is illegal. And that's really what is happening here, because I think that everything ever started illegally because it had not been legalized yet, because it had not been organized yet in a formal structure or anything. Even the name of the people who are in charge here of the city, the people that they are called law keepers, and I call myself lawbreaker, and then we come together and we have to find each other somewhere in the middle, because that is what progress is about. So when they stand in front of me, they talk to me, well, everything you do is illegal, but we are doing it together. We are doing it together in such a way that we actually define our new reality together. And then at one stage, it will become legal, because I've even universities which are doing law systems that are now redefining laws and even challenging laws, and doing these things from a different perspective. So I think we have to be willing to break things, even if we want to go forward. But I see that Stacey wants to react on something.
I want to ask you something. I want to ask you, because you confused me. What are you doing that's illegal?
Well, what I create is communities in which government is taking shared responsibility with citizens and with business and with science all together. And for instance, by co-creating healthy city, you cannot do that just as a government. You need your citizens and everything. So doing a community like that, where the government is investing, for instance, money, it's not a subsidy, because a subsidy is providing money to somebody else taking the responsibility. So we're taking the responsibility together, and they use public money and to fund a cooperation. But that is, in essence, illegal in our current structure, because government has to provide funds and then has a control function to how that money is being spent. But you can't control yourself, because that could be misinterpreted, could be subject to illegal actions or those kind of things in the terms of our legal reality where we come from. So if I leverage things to the level of shared responsibility, then suddenly the old rules don't apply anymore. And that necessarily makes it we become illegal in working together. But
Okay.
we accept that illegality.
Okay. I hear that word differently, but I get it now.
Yeah.
Do you remember
Robin Hood was not law.
You remember in Harry Potter, the famous scene where they're talking about coming up with some solution to the problem of the day, and everybody realizes that the kids have to break all the rules to implement their plan. And there's a famous passage where Hermione realizes that they're going to have to break all the rules, and she's in favor of it. Remember that scene?
Never saw Harry Potter.
It's a classic scene where they have to break the rules to solve the problem at hand.
Well, my friends laugh because I was always known for saying, well, those rules don't apply to me.
It's a perennial issue because there's greedy bastards making the rules.
It's not always greedy bastards making the rules. So it's the unintended consequences sometimes that are part of the problem.
Can you imagine that in the communities that I create, we don't even have contracts? We work totally based on the authenticity of each of the participants, and that's difficult because how do you create a sense of authenticity to government, for instance, when they play a double role often? It's so I demand some authenticity, and once you have the authenticity, when we can play the game on basis of equality and trust. Why do we need contracts? Why do we need laws, rules, and those kind of things? When we established with 23 municipalities here a measurement network, suddenly I had a whole bunch of lawyers sitting there trying to their incredible best to fit sustainability and working together in the current law system. And they went bananas. They went absolutely bananas. They were telling me, God, we've been sweating ourselves out to get into this contract, which is joining all these municipalities in investing together in these kind of things. And I brought them little instruments to help them fit it somehow into their systems. In the end, they managed it more or less. But we don't need any lawyers anymore. If we get to that level of trust and a common goal, then it is trying to work on the basis of the authenticity of everybody who can bring something into the community, and we just make them accountable for that particular part, which is a beautiful type of thing. Then why rules? The only rule is to not have rules, to have a common objective.
What you said, making somebody accountable for that particular part, that's really key as well, I think.
That's right. Yeah, it's like a business who brings in a particular product, but they sit at the table. So the bringing in the product is not the end of the process. It's the beginning of the process, because the product has something to do towards the end goal that we all have to achieve. So the business is there to make sure that what they promise with the product is actually happening with the product. And if it's not, they will have to adjust the product. So and the same goes with scientists. They come in, they bring certain knowledge, but then in the path that we develop together, they collect as much new knowledge as what they bring in the beginning. It's kind of amazing process to commit to. If you commit to co-creating a healthy city, which will never finish, at least you take steps together, and you make measurable progress by bringing in each of us certain things. Citizens bring in change in behavior. Well, if we all step out of our cars and we sell our cars, we suddenly have a totally different environment. Okay, so that is our little thing. And then other people bring in their products, but they do have to bring in their products out of self-interest because they sell it, but it has to be contributing to the common interest of healthy cities. So it should not pollute, it shouldn't use fossil energies and these kind of things. This is kind of amazing, the process, the way it works.
Do you have a rubric for who you will work with, who you'll partner with?
I don't. It is a self-selecting process, because the people who are in a survival mode or enterprises who are in the survival mode, they come there hunting, and the first thing they are, is there a budget? No, there is no budget. We have a common goal. And when we establish for ourselves a particular project, then we will also define the budget which is needed to do that. So I invite them to co-create rather than to come and take. And those who are in survival mode, they don't have time or interest in doing that effort, so they disappear.
A natural way for something to evolve when the people who are most least interested disappear. And
That's interesting, yeah. We've had a similar example with government, for instance, when we started a citizens initiative somewhere, and we invited government to participate, and they said, well, no, we don't have any time, it's not part of our policy, whatever. And we said, well, it doesn't matter, we do it anyway. And then it becomes surprise, oh, wait, you don't need us? And then we start going ahead with it as a citizens enterprise. And suddenly government comes along and says, well, we want to be part of it anyway, because then suddenly true reality start appearing. So it becomes part of their policy. So, but we do have to be persistent in what we want to achieve.
I'm interested.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying,
Sorry.
there's
Go ahead.
an agreement. Sam put up agreements, and I'm interested because agreements are fine. They help the flow of the conversations and the debates, but disagreements are important too. I'd like a way to have some focus attention on the disagreements, because this is where the people who are on the outside are brought in, I think, to the rational model where we're thinking about progress. Sorry, Barry. Okay.
Yeah, when Jean-Paul says the only rule is to not have any rules, that's not a new idea. In fact, the conflict between having rules and not having rules is perhaps the oldest conflict in the annals of human civilization. And to point out that it's not a new idea, the first systems thinkers historically were actually called theologians, because they didn't call themselves this, they were theologians. And the theologians who wrote this idea up, wrote it up in an allegory in the second chapter of Genesis, where the character who plays the deity says to the humans, don't make any rules. You're going to start killing yourself if you have rules. So the idea is that there's only one rule coming down on high from the professor of the sky is don't make any rules. You're going to start killing yourself. And that's already in chapter 2 of Genesis. It's not a new idea, but a lot of conflict arises because of this desire to have rules where the professor in the sky says it's a stupid idea. Don't do it. You're going to start killing yourself.
The only way you can do that is when you have a commonly agreed context, a commonly agreed playing field.
Right.
Otherwise, it's chaos.
Exactly.
Yes.
Precisely. Those rules made chaos. They made drama. They made conflict, and they made chaos, and they made death and destruction. And that was predicted 3,500 years ago by the first systems thinkers.
And then about the disagreement part, yes, it's very clear to be, and we go through processes of disagreement with each other, but we try to get to a common consensus because we have a common goal, and the common goal is not money-based; it's value-based. So when there is a disagreement, we try to find a solution to see how, in the disagreement, we can find a common understanding to go forward. So it's always based on finding a consensus, and not a political consensus, which is always the average of everybody and then downgraded down. It is always upgrading ourselves into making a consensus to get something done. Yeah. And in disagreement, all right, fair enough, then we disagree, but we do see to find the common ground, and there's always somewhere a common ground.
It just takes a long time to get to it. Oh, you're muted, Alex.
I was talking about the rule in the factory, and the daily rule was that the maintenance guy had to always oil the machines every morning. So, that's something that is like an agreement. You've got an agreement with your employees to use these rules. They're wise, they're great. Without them, the machines break down and you lose time and you lose profit. So the rules are there to help us create industry and progress humanity. The problem is when the rules are made by the greedy bastards. Sorry, Stacey.
Well, there's a difference between running a factory with linear processes and the complexity of society. And the complexity of society, co-creating a healthy city where there are so many different interests and everything playing a role and mingling among each other and everything and making progress. It requires a totally different thing of establishing rules, because then you start becoming linear processes again. You want to have a degree of open playing field to get to the common goal, and to get to creativity, because that is really what we want. We want to establish things we cannot buy because they don't exist yet, and we co-create them together. So what would a building, if you want to build a apartment story or something in a context of co-creating a healthy city, then suddenly the whole building perception of how to build it in context with its natural environment, the living green, the social engagement type of functions and everything that is needed to establish that building, gives a totally different idea to the architecture and the usage of material and everything to the building. So it requires a common dialogue also with the surroundings in which this has to be fitted.
You know, if I were running the factory, I wouldn't have a rule that the mechanic has to oil the machine every morning. I would say there is a relationship between the amount of oil and the amount of friction. Measure the amount of friction continuously and apply the oil proportional to the amount of friction continuously. Not a fixed amount of oil at a fixed time every day. No, that's inefficient. The efficient thing is measure the friction and apply the oil proportionally all the time. That's a function, not a rule.
It's exactly what we should do in conversation too.
Measure the friction and apply some lubricant, some levity.
Function rule.
So,
I mean, go read a statute and see if you find any formulas in there. You know, apply this remedy proportionally to this amount of undesirable, effect. How many pieces of legislation have mathematical formulas like that in it?
Not many. Not many. I don't think.
Not too many.
I want to show off this. This is half of a big hexagon. It's only 3, but there's 6 to make the hexagon. And I'm gonna design that into a token that you can wear a brooch and shrink. I'm going to shrink it down smaller and use it as a shape because it's interesting. And you can make these out of bamboo if you want, or you can just I can just design one that's manufactured in a die and stamped out. But that's only the cover. Inside is the ingredients. Inside is the chip and the Wi-Fi and the USB connector and the cryptographic signature that belongs to only to one real human being. It can't be hacked by a bot. How would you do that? You'd link it to your iris and your password and your secret phrase. 3 different things. And your password's got to have more than 12 digits and include symbols and numbers. Over.
Okay, so can we use that as your checkout? Because Sam's off camera, but I know he has to leave. We're at the top of the hour. I know I have to leave. Would anybody like to check out? There he is. I stepped in for you.
Oh, thanks. I've been listening. I've been kind of taking notes, but I was speaking way too much early, so I decided to free up the airspace. Thanks, John and Paul, for stepping in.
That's beautiful to be with you, crowd. Beautiful. I just wonder what it says on the chest of Barry, as usual. There are only 10 kinds of people.
1 0 is not 10.
And binary and
Only
those
2 kinds of people.
1-0. Always interesting. Right. Thank you guys very much. Very nice.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's good
Nice
to see you,
meeting you
Jean-Paul.
Yeah, good here. Same here. Kyla, I see you tomorrow.
Yeah, and I wanted to check out with that too. John Paul and I and the 2 kids are going to have another session at 10:30 my time, 1:30 your time, and then 7:30 Jean Paul and Tisa's time, maybe. And Alex, I don't know what time you're.
Early hours of the morning.
So that's tomorrow, Kayla, not today.
Tomorrow, 30
Okay.
minutes after unblocking. So I don't have an agenda, so we'll see how this goes. I'm going to ask Dakota's mom if she has any questions. And then, of course, I'll see if anyone has any questions. But please, jump in and write questions, and we'll see how it goes. But I just want go ahead.
I just wonder, do these kids know now where the Netherlands is?
The Netherlands.
Them again. Thank you. I've
Holland.
got a map. Like I want to get a globe right next to,
I think that'll be interesting for them, to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add with this session, it was very rich with just wonderful ideas. And the only thought that I could contribute was, I wish I could teach the world how to make lei. Because when you string flowers together in any sort of way, I always tell all of my students, just absolve your mind of any negative thoughts, because what you put into the lei is, what's in your thought is what you're going to put into the lei. So if you're frustrated, it might be a crap show. But I also tell them, this is time consuming. You're not going to have a beautiful lei that everyone posts on Instagram immediately, especially if it's your first time. So just be good to yourself. And another thing that I do, which is very sustainable, is I always tell all of my students, make sure you only use what you're going to put into there. So even though it's more laborious, because you have to think, oh gosh, I have to cut this, and I think I'm gonna have 5 of these, and it just causes people to really think and not waste. That's one thing, is I just can't handle the waste that we as humans have in our life. In my classes, there's just no excuse to have this type of waste. And so I really like what you said, John Paul, about, we're gonna play my game, our game. We're gonna make it our thing. So
Yeah.
Anyways, that's my checkout.
Where the Dakotas are in this country?
Oh yeah. You'll have that. His mind is like
Well, when you think about scraps, food scraps and things that can go into the digester to help the plants grow, then it's not rubbish. Food scraps is not rubbish. And even the tins, empty cans and soda drink bottles is not rubbish, because it can be recycled. Everything, nothing is rubbish.
Well, I have to go.
Over and out.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
could ask him where France is. When I started my job in New Jersey at Bell Labs, I moved into an apartment, and the teenage girl next door said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Nebraska." She said, "Nebraska? What state is that in?"
Oh yeah, they're funny.
You should have said it's in the Netherlands.
It's in the state of confusion.
That was a confusion about Amsterdam last time also.
Oh my gosh. That's, I have to admit, I was like, where's Amsterdam? Like,
I had to laugh when I thought about how the people in Poland are called Poles, right? And the people in Finland are called Finns. But what do you call the people in Holland?
Hollish.
hey, you know what? Some people don't know where what the Polynesian Triangle is, so there's that.
I didn't know where it was.
I know. No, this is good.
Well, let's first get our geography right then. Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.
I'm muted. No, I'm not. Anybody hanging around for the after show, or is that the end?
No, I'm gonna go have breakfast at 1 o'clock here.
Yes, that's not after show for me, just
Okay,
hanging
take care.
till then. But I invited Jean Paul, so I gave him the link for the meeting. So
Excellent.
I'm responsible for getting him in for today. So it was nice to see him today. So I'm leaving now. Bye.
So Sam may be off. I'm going to end the session for Sam in case he's not attending here. So I'm going to say end for all.